Hi all, I apologize for this humdrum message, but I need to tell you something. Trying to promote economic development in the global south, it's just not worth it. And here's why. Essentially, all we're really doing is forcing Western capitalist culture down the throats of millions or billions of people. People who are still exhausted from putting up with European colonialism for hundreds of years. By developing the global south, we're effectively wiping numerous traditional cultures off the face of the earth. Peaceful cultures. I'm talking about cultures that have evolved from hundreds, if not thousands of years of toiling the land, fishing the seas, netting the sky for bats, whatever. All gone now with the mere signing of this or that development loan or this or that trade deal. And think about it. What are we talking about when we really say development? Typically, we're talking about building huge dams that will fundamentally reshape the physical geography of a country, forcing untold numbers of people off their land and covering their homes in lake water. We're also talking about highways and mass transit systems that cut straight through the very heart of ancient agricultural lands, and in doing so, tearing up local cultures with each mile of asphalt. We're talking about gouging the earth for raw materials, and in doing so, spewing out toxic chemicals in the soil and into the rivers. And if the land can handle any more agricultural development after that, well, now we're talking about pumping even more toxic chemicals into the soil in an effort to force plants to grow faster and bigger than they naturally would, or to kill off all the pests that might diminish the yields at harvest time. All in an effort to feed a population quickly outgrowing the planet's carrying capacity. And in the cities, we're talking about building huge factories and factory systems where countless people will toil countless hours to produce mostly unnecessary consumer goods. For who? For rich people in the global north. These factory systems will also pollute the ground, the water, and the sky, all the while using up precious and finite natural resources that we humans and the earth itself need to survive. Resources like fresh water supplies, like our beautiful green forest, like the air we breathe. Oh, but you say that people in the global south want this? Well, tell me, what do they really get out of all of it? Here's what. They get to exchange their pristine agricultural villages, their bright, beautiful clothing, their traditional songs and dances, and even their native languages sometimes. Yeah, they get the opportunity to give all of this up in exchange for a mind-numbing, soul-crushing 12-hour day winding spools inside of a dark, poorly ventilated factory on the outskirts of some overpopulated city with no green space, no water, and no clean air to breathe. They get to exchange the intimacy and social trust that they enjoyed in their small villages for an anonymous existence among millions of other invisible people who they can't learn to trust, so instead they learn to fear. And as urban life introduces them to ever more risks, like drug abuse, violence, corruption, disease, loneliness, depression, and what Emil Durkheim called anomie. Well, they begin to build walls around their homes and shut themselves up inside, burying themselves like moles to hide from the inevitable consequences of what we call development. Oh, but you say, don't they make more money now? Sure, they make more money now, but their cost of living is also much higher than it was before. And what leftover money they do have, well, now they have to spend on protecting themselves from the other curses of development. Here, I'm talking about the disease that you get when you live packed like sardines in a musty housing complex, or the crime and the violence that sprouts up when traditional social institutions break down, or the purified water that you need to buy now because industry polluted all of your rivers. Even the TVs and the smartphones you have to buy in order to entertain yourself when there's no longer a safe place outside to go run about. Well, because the machine of capitalist development has turned you into a mere cog, and that's all that's left of your leisure, of your dreams, and even your identity. Well, we can sum this up with one word: fantasy. You see, people who talk about development have this wild idea that if you just build this giant dam here, build this huge factory here, and sign this trade deal over here, well then soon everyone living in mud huts around the world is suddenly going to be driving around in convertibles and singing, "Gotta make my mind up, which seat can I take? It's Friday, Friday, gotta get down on Friday." Friday. Like the whole world could be like Beverly Hills 90210. But that's not how global capitalism works, my friends. Global capitalism needs inequality to thrive. It needs the majority of humankind to exist in a perpetual state of dependence and servility. And this means that development isn't going to allow people in the global south to live like their rich counterparts in the global north. Ever. No, it's merely going to make sure that those rich counterparts in the global north, they get richer and richer, at least until the planet can't take it anymore. And then everyone, everywhere will lose everything. Again, I'm sorry for this humdrum message. I'm Professor Michael Wolf, and this is the Politics of Development Online. Wait, listen all, I'm the real Professor Michael Wolf, and this is the real Politics of Development Online. And just give me a minute to explain why pretty much everything this imposter over here just said is complete rubbish. Let's start with his first point. You know, we're forcing Western capitalist culture down the throats of all those poor people who are still exhausted from centuries of European colonialism. Whatever. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and defend colonialism or anything, but listen, the colonial era is over. Now we're talking about sovereign and independent national societies that have every right to choose whichever path of development they want. And by and large, you know, the countries of the developing world, this global south, as this guy erroneously calls it, well, they're choosing capitalism. And why? Well, because just like you and me, just everyone wants money, everyone wants things, and everyone wants status. And it's capitalism that offers all of this. That quaint old village life and that schmomo over here thinks is like the Garden of Eden or something. Well, that offers nothing of the sort. And think about it. What does that quaint old village life offer that is so special anyways? It's true, it offers a lot of culture. That is, culture in the form of a highly repressive social institution that tends to smother any diversity of ideas, that tends to reject any kind of innovation that might threaten the power of traditional elites, that tends to subjugate women and treat them in essence like any other form of livestock, and that tends to embrace a rigid moral order that generally resists any kind of change at all, negative or positive. Oh, but I get it. We here in the West, we really like our world's authentic cultures, especially those that bring us colorful clothing, cool drum beats, and anciently ways of making bread and all that. But worry not, my friends. Development is not going to get rid of this. In fact, it's going to allow those local cultures to grow. Yeah, for now, there'll be a truly global market for the consumption of those local cultural goods, hopefully more than those cultural bads, because development, well, with its highways and its ports and its trade deals, is going to allow the poorest, most isolated peoples on the planet to finally access markets anywhere and everywhere. And you think they don't want that access? Well, you do know that being dirt poor and isolated from the amenities of the modern world does come with some downsides, right? Like say, depending solely on the rain to irrigate your crops. In the developing world, most of which lies within about 1,000 miles of the equator, severe periodic droughts are just a fact of life. But when you don't have the kind of sophisticated modern irrigation systems that come with development, well, you go hungry when it doesn't rain. And hunger, it not only hurts the stomach, but it also stunts your mental and your physical growth, while making your body more susceptible to debilitating and often lethal disease. And, well, without development, there are no hospitals nearby or modern medicines to help you treat that disease. And so I guess you just have to die young in your little Garden of Eden. Oh, but is the undeveloped world really a Garden of Eden, Professor Michael Wolf? Professor Michael Wolf over there, he was complaining about industrial pollution a minute ago, and he gave the impression that before modern development, everyone just lived a wholesome and happy life in these pristine agricultural villages or something. But is this true? In the most undeveloped countries I've traveled to, I found that people, they don't have butane or even charcoal to cook their food, and so they have to chop down all the forest lands around them just to tender their beans. Then, when the trees are gone and there's nothing left to hold the soil down, well, the rain comes finally and it washes all the nutrients away, turning one Garden of Eden after another into a desert wasteland. On top of this, well, they don't have running water or sometimes even latrines, and so people have to poop all over the place. Yep, polluting their own water supply, which forces them to cook their water too and burn more trees or face the consequences of more debilitating disease. Okay, I'm being unfair. Even if village life isn't all it's cracked up to be, Professor Wolf over here does have a point about two important things. First, industrial pollution and natural resource extraction can be a big problem for the environment. And two, city life for the first generation or so of poor migrants from the countryside can be a little daunting. I'll give him that. What with all the violence, the overcrowding, and the anomie, as he says. But to these concerns, I've got two magic words for you. The Kuznets curve. Now, what's the Kuznets curve? Well, essentially, it's the inverted U-shaped curve that saved capitalism from its demise back in 1971 when its inventor, Simon Kuznets, discovered that all of the horrible things that capitalism produces, like environmental destruction, inequality, and overpopulation, well, all of these things are really just growing pains that go away with time, as long as we're patient. For example, look here at the relationship between industrialization and environmental degradation. The Kuznets curve clearly shows that while industrialization undoubtedly accelerates the destruction of the environment in its early stages, well, we eventually transition into a post-industrial phase in which our new societal wealth and values combine to provide us both the capability and the interest in protecting the environment. And you see, the same can be said about all the bad stuff that comes with development, whether it's inequality or overpopulation or just trash accumulating in the streets. You see, after a few generations of good, hard work, people in the developing world will be just like people in Bellingham. That's to say, they'll have money, they'll have clean air, and maybe they'll even have beards and tattoos of pine trees. The point is, I know, development looks ugly at first. It always does. Just think of our own industrial revolution. All those dim-lit factories where poor immigrant kids lost their childhoods to the great march forward of capitalism. All those waterways and wetlands permanently damaged by industrial pollution. And all those animal and plant species gone extinct. But that's all in the past now, my friends. We couldn't have gotten to where we are today, what with our electric cars and our actually pristine national parks, if it weren't for development. Doesn't everybody deserve the same thing? I'm Professor Michael Wolf, and this is the Politics of Development Online. Hi all, I apologize for the behavior of those two. They're imposters, they're buffoons, and you shouldn't listen to anything they say. Here's the truth. Development is a very complicated thing. It's complicated because there are always going to be winners and losers no matter what path a society takes forward, developing or not. And for the losers, there's rarely a consolation prize. Look, development necessarily implies major change, and change naturally leads to the uprooting of anything traditional relationships, processes, and entire ways of life. In other words, no matter how much you gain, you really always lose something when you develop. And that can hurt. On the other hand, resolving not to develop doesn't necessarily mean stasis, because at this point in history, there is literally no human community that is not somehow affected by the machinations of the global economy or its impact on politics, culture, and the environment. Change is happening whether we like it or not. And I guess that leaves us with perhaps only one real question. To the extent that it is really in our hands at all, how do we want to help shape future change in a globalized world marked by such extreme contrasts between the rich and the poor, between cultural homogeneity and diversity, and between natural beauty and nature's destruction? You tell me. Now I'm the real Professor Michael Wolf, and this is the Politics of Development Online.
If you catch me at the